remember and celebrate the work of Walter Wink. Walter and I were colleagues at Union in New York. Walter is assistant professor of New Testament, and I was a PhD candidate during the wild days of 1968 to 1974, or the days of the Columbia Student Revolt, the Black Manifesto at Riverside and Union, and the lesser-known New Testament Tutors Strike in the fall of 1970, which happened, in which Walter and I ended up on, Rodney's description of this, these graphic confrontations were also reminiscent of some of the battles that happened at Union, of all places, in that period. Walter published his 1973 Biblical Manifesto, The Bible and Human Transformation, Toward a New Paradigm for Biblical Studies, with its famous opening line, "Historical biblical criticism is bankrupt."
Amen.
Probably as a direct result of that single line, he was denied tenure at Union the next year after its publication. That happened in 1974. And I remember wearing ribbons on my new PhD robe, as a number of us did at the Union commencement in 1974, to protest that decision of the faculty. Walter and I had said virtually these same words, those same words to each other in a number of conversations that we had about the need for a new paradigm of biblical study and interpretation in the years leading up to his sabbatical at the Guild for Psychological Studies in San Francisco that led to the Bible and Human Transformation. A lesser-known manifesto was my dissertation, Mark the Storyteller, which was written in that same period. And so these two developments of the recovery and the reappropriation of storytelling is central to the life and mission of the church and the biblical interpretation, and Walter's emphasis on developing a new paradigm that included the objective study of the Bible in its historical context with the subjective interaction of the Bible with the personal experiences, the psychological dynamics of individuals and communities. So the Messiah of Peace is a revision of that dissertation in light of many of the things that have happened in biblical criticism in the years since. The Messiah of Peace is then the first major performance criticism commentary on a biblical book. So this was that period was a time of rethinking and of exploring a new paradigm in response to the new needs that were developing and that we had identified, in part as a result of all of those conflicts that were happening in the 60s and the new awareness that was present both from the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement and so on. We were scholarly revolutionaries, or at least we tried to be. Only time will tell whether we brought about significant change. Paradigm shifts of this magnitude in biblical studies take a long time, and they involve significant personal cost. And what I want to do in this presentation is to step back from the current day-to-day conflicts. This was a particularly inspiring session, listening to what's happening in Charlotte, of which I was unaware, largely. I heard about them on Monday, but I really didn't know. And I certainly didn't know the stories of all these demonstrations. But I want to step back because the Bible underlying the present political conflicts, how the Bible is interpreted, has a major role in American politics, in global politics. And so I want to reflect on that convinced that we really do need a new paradigm for biblical study, and that the Center for the Bible and Social Justice has a unique contribution to make to that new paradigm. Walter's seminal work was the Powers series, and his identification of Jesus' third way of nonviolent resistance to the powers of this evil age, and his exposition of the pervasive belief in the myth of redemptive violence, both in the ancient world and today, has transformed our understanding of what is involved in social action, social justice, and peace. The practice of biblical storytelling also invites a dialectic between an objective listening to a story in its original historical context and a subjective interiorization and exploration of the connections of the story with personal and communal experience now. And just as Walter developed biblical workshops that he and June conducted for many years, so also biblical storytelling workshops have now been developed and conducted all over the world by members of the Network of Biblical Storytellers International. Walter and I even did a week-long workshop together at Auburn, in which we explored the interaction between our two models of biblical workshops that explored the intersection between biblical traditions and the lived experience of people now. So my understanding is that we are still in the seminal period of the formation of a new paradigm. And my recommendation is that the Center for Social Justice, for the Bible and Social Justice, be an integral part of that new formation of a biblical paradigm for a post-literate digital age. So a central dimension of my work has been on the study of the relationship between the biblical tradition and media, communication technology. So, just as a context for this, this reconception of the Bible as performance literature is a part of now a major change that is happening in biblical scholarship. So the development of performance criticism and the outgrowth of the Bible and Ancient Modern Media group that I established in 1983 and has continued to develop. There are now over 20 groups within SBL that are exploring various dimensions of the new agenda that was developed by that group. And what is happening is that we are beginning the process of the reconception of the Bible. That investigation has major implications for the Center for the Bible and Social Justice. So first of all, a central dimension of this new paradigm. We have assumed, as a global biblical community, that the Bible was originally a library of texts that were read by readers, usually individual readers reading the text alone in silence. Thus, references to the reader are ubiquitous in biblical commentaries and monographs. Recent research, and research from this community that is being formed, has revealed that literacy in the ancient world was very limited. Current estimates of literacy in the first century are that 90 to 90% of persons were functionally illiterate. The publication of literary compositions took place by being performed for audiences, sometimes with and often without a manuscript. But with or without a manuscript, the performances were from memory because of the nature of the manuscript. You had to memorize it in order to be able to read it, because the letters were just lined up. There was no division of words, no punctuation. You had to know it in order to be able to read it. And as far as biblical scholarship has presupposed this framework for the composition and publication of the Bible and has sought to understand the Bible in its ancient context, we have been engaged in a massive media anachronism in which we have read back into the ancient world the practices of a much later culture, namely the culture of the 17th, 18th, and 19th century in Germany and the United States. First of all, in Germany. Contemporary brain research makes it clear that there are different sensory systems in the brain for visual and auditory sense data. We literally perceive a different Bible if we hear the compositions performed than if we examine the texts with our eyes in silence. Our current practice is directly analogous to examining the musical scores of Bach and Mozart, looking at them in great detail and never hearing or playing the music. So, if we want to perceive the Bible in its original context, we have to perform it and listen to it and discover what happens in the interaction between audiences and tellers of biblical tales. Now, the formation of the social memory of the ancient communities of the big tent of Israelite religion, in that context, the telling and reading of their central sacred traditions was central to the maintenance and integrity of the communities. And in the faction of Israelites inspired by Jesus, the learning and telling of the stories of Israel and the stories of Jesus in the early church decisively changed the relationship between Israel's religion and the world of the Gentiles, specifically the Romans. The church eventually transformed some of the major social institutions of the Roman world, such as the gladiatorial games and the sex slavery of the vanquished. It also established charities for the poor and the sick, and established communities of rich and poor, slave and free, Israelites and Gentiles, around and across the boundaries that were present in the ancient world. Now, in our present paradigm, the role of biblical texts in the pursuit of social justice and peace is to provide ideological/theological content and historical data, theological ideas, historical, quote, facts, or not facts. Its function is reflected in the library. The hope is that biblical scholars and social activists will come to this library and center here at Stony Point and gain new perspectives that will strengthen and inspire corporate action by the study of the texts here. That will primarily happen by people reading texts in silence in the way in which we have projected on the ancient world. The learning and telling of biblical traditions both sheds light on these new, old, ancient compositions and potentially gets them out into the world of 21st century media, which is not primarily text-based, but rather is the sound and sight of video, television, film, this new media world that has developed in the last 100 years. We have not yet figured out how to do this. The possibility is there when the Bible is treated as performance literature. But I would suggest that we as a left-wing Christian community need to address a primary failure that has happened in these last 50 years. The Christian left has failed to develop a communication system in the media of this age. And we have left television, film, radio, all of those media to the right wing, with all the political consequences that we are now experiencing on a daily basis. This is a very serious matter for which we need to give, I think, serious attention as communities. Strangely, the progressive left has been conservatively right in relation to media. It has become a highly resistant movement to this communication revolution that has happened in the 20th century. At the core of this, the foundation then, is the recovery of the basic character of the Bible as performance literature, as sound, as stories that were told, and interactive with audiences. So I'd like to summarize the basic results of the study of Mark as performance literature, as indicated by the title of the commentary, Messiah of Peace. So, first, Mark was composed. I'll make a whole series of dogmatic statements here. Now, I won't have time to show you the evidence for this, so in order to do that, you'll have to pursue it on your own. That could be by reading the book, interacting with it. It could be by engaging a whole series of things that are now being produced by scholars who are working in this area, and by the Network of Biblical Storytellers. Mark was composed and organized as sound, with mnemonic links to facilitate memorization and performance. The sound map of the story reveals that it was composed in the breath units of cola and periods that were the basic units of Greek composition, described by the major Greek rhetorical treatises, such as Quintilian's Institutio Oratoria, Dionysius Halicarnassensis, De Compositionem Verborum, and the anonymous Rhetorica ad Herennium. These rhetorical treatises from the same period and some prior to the period of the Bible described the basic principles of composition that were pursued by Greek composers. The structures of composition were designed to enable audiences to remember what they heard and to build to the rhetorical climaxes that were the goal of every Greek rhetorician and storyteller. It's all in the details, so you have to listen to it. There's a website, the Messiah of Peace, that has Mark's Passion narrative recited in English and in Greek. And so it's a chance to experience it. Second, when Mark is heard as addressed to audiences, the analysis of audience address reveals that the audiences of Mark were addressed as Judeans, not as Gentile Christians, as has been the operative presupposition of the major Markan commentaries. The characterization of the audience when a story is told occurs when the storyteller presents the words of a character, in the Gospels usually Jesus, and addresses the audience as the object of Jesus' words. The audience is then invited to hear Jesus' words as that character, and in effect to become that character. Let me show you how it works. Jesus snuck back into Capernaum, and the word got around that he was at home. Many gathered together, so there was no longer any room for them, not even around the door. And he was preaching the word to them. Now, there came 4 friends carrying a paralytic. And when they couldn't get in because of the crowd, they went up on the roof. They tore a hole in the roof. And when they had made a hole that was big enough, they let down the pallet on which the paralytic lay. And when Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic,